Zambia turns 60 on October 24th this year. The country's fortunes and development in the last 60 years have largely been driven by mining activities, especially on the Copperbelt province. Mining as an activity has been existent in Zambia for almost 100 years. The argument, however, has been whether the country and its people have largely benefited from their mineral resource and wealth. Some argue that multinational investors in the mining sector have been ripping off the country by extracting minerals from the land, much to the detriment of the environment and the communities. As Zambia turns 60, we ask, has mining been beneficial through the experiences of the country's mining giant, First Quantum Minerals? They have been existing in the country since 1996. My guest on Costa this evening is the country director for First Quantum Minerals in Zambia, Anthony Mukutuma. Anthony, it's a pleasure to host you on Costa, and welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Costa, and good evening, viewers.
Let's start by your reflections as a mining corporation. Zambia is celebrating 60 years of independence, a huge, milestone. First Quantum has been in the country since 1996 and obviously making huge expansions from what we traditionally knew as mining on the Copperbelt into new green and brownfield projects, mainly in the northwestern province. What are your reflections in terms of the major milestones that FQM has achieved in contributing towards Zambia's development and economic stability?
Yeah, thanks, Costa. First Quantum has been in Zambia since 1996, and the business has really grown from running an operation back in Ndola that was producing about 10,000 tons of copper per year into the mining company that you see today, which has got its footprint globally and producing just under 800,000 tons per year. Really, our roots have been in Zambia, and starting out of there from Ndola, we've since grown into Solwezi and Kalumbila, and the milestone for us is we are a Zambian company, and we've been able to grow a business, a mining company out of Zambia into the world.
Let's get into the aspects of giving the viewers out there an understanding in terms of your structures at a global level and basically how it ties down into Zambia. There's been this ownership, this debate obviously of, do Zambians really own their mines? Obviously, there's huge investments, and ZCCMIH looking at the citizens' interests. Just briefly run us in terms of how the FQM structures are globally and how it ties down into the Zambian operation.
So FQM is set out as a global mining company. It's listed in Toronto, and that's where we raised our finances to really start our business in Zambia. The business in Zambia are fully owned by First Quantum, and Kansanshi, as you know, has got a stake that's owned by ZCCM. And that's how the structure has been set up. So the entities of FQM that are set up in Zambia are entities listed here. And so they pay the taxes in Zambia. We have on our sites are actually administered here in Zambia, and the businesses and the companies that we have to work with have got contracts with our Zambian companies.
You're obviously sitting as country director at the helm of the Zambian operation. I think more recently there was an announcement out of the FQM operation here in Zambia that there was going to be some sort of, whether I can call it segmentation of your operations in Kansanshi and Kalumbila at different levels. Just kindly break down to us what that was all about.
What it was about is really, we've got a small group of people that have to work on our Zambian mines, and they also work on our operations worldwide. So what we did was to really segment that small group of people out of the two mines so they can actually sit centrally in Lusaka and look after our mines in Zambia and also our mines around the world. So it was really administrative that we can have a core team of people that have skills that are useful for our mines in Zambia and also our mines worldwide. and being able to have those people travel around the world but have their base in Lusaka.
Before we get into something that is extremely exciting, the S3 project, Anthony, again, I'll reflect on the fact that we are turning 60 years as a country, and again, the debate around mining has been 60 years after independence. Is it not possible for Zambians to own and run our mines? I've looked at your profile. I mean, you are a chemical engineer, I suppose, but you've worked as a Zambian, trained at Birmingham at the highest level. You've worked in Finland, you've worked in Mauritania, you've worked in Australia. So sitting here with you, we do have Zambians of international acclaim that understand, mining. As you reflect as a Zambian, have we done much as locals to contribute or harness our mining potential?
Now, Costa, when you look at mining in Zambia, it's been operated and managed by Zambians for many, many years. It's not a case of can Zambians run mines or not. I think it's a case of can Zambians get financing to operate mines. And I think we're starting to see small mining companies and medium-sized ones coming along that are owned by Zambians. And that's something that we'll start to see more and more as financing a mine is much easier. Now we've got a mine as First Quantum that we did exploration on many years ago. It's in Mukushi. It's called Fishtai. It's been handed over to a mining company called Mimosa. And Mimosa are going to get the financing themselves. They are Zambians. And they are going to develop a mine there. It's going to be a mine that's roughly between 30 to 40,000 tons per year of copper, which is not small. And so my point is that we will start to see, as financing is accessible to Zambians, we will start to see Zambians start to form mining companies and operate them themselves. It's never been a question of skill. If you go back to the history of Zambia, you probably will find that early 70s, we already had general managers running mines in Zambia who were Zambians.
But obviously, when you look at the C-suite level of decision makers and people really calling the shots, have we done well? Are we getting there? I mean, speaking to you and looking at what you've achieved makes Zambians obviously proud. But again, there's been this argument of late that when multinational investors come in, it's the expatriates that really are getting the C-suite jobs and probably getting the better pay.
I think I've heard that argument, and I think it's a valid one in many ways. There's surely a case to get more Zambians in the C-suite, for sure. Come with making sure we invest more in developing not only engineers, but leaders. And developing leaders requires a dedicated plan of how do we get people to come from engineers into leaders. And we are starting to see leaders actually develop on our sites and other mines as well. So I think it's just a matter of time. We will see our getting into the C-suite. It's taken a while, but I think if you follow that it takes time, because if you develop an engineer like myself, I'm trained to be an engineer. I make things, I can design things, but that aspect of being able to lead a team, that aspect of being able to lead the finances that you need, all those skills have to be channeled in, and somebody has to go under a whole series of training. And that's what I went through. I mean, I first went on a development plan back in 2010. And that's really set me up very well. I've been able to get into the best schools in the world and get skills that have enabled me to get into a leadership role. And being able to make sure that more Zambians have access to that sort of training is important.
Is there anything that you are doing towards this as First Quantum? You yourself have spoken about this, but even way back under ZCCM, you were beneficiary of things like scholarships. Is there any role that you're playing to bridge this gap?
Yes, yes, Costa, and that's something that I'm very proud of. As First Quantum, we do invest a lot in scholarships and bursaries for kids from secondary schools into universities in Zambia and across, and also into trade schools. But what we've also started to do over the last 3 years is to actually invest in leadership training. So we do get our people that are engineers or in HR or lawyers get some leadership training that's actually structured to make sure that they are getting ready for the C-suite. And I was GM at Kansanshi for the last 3 years or 4 years. And in that time, we were able to develop about 16 Zambians on a development cost that roughly might have cost us close to $30,000 to $40,000 per person. Taking them through a program that has now set them up to be ready leaders. So when we get into a period where we start to see like openings and vacancies in our C-suite, we've at least got a pipeline of talent that's coming that way. So we'll start to see a lot more of that. I think ZCCM did well to develop engineers. I think the mining companies of today must focus a lot more on developing their engineers into leaders.
Great. Let's get into this issue of the S3, project. This is a project, obviously, that had an initial investment of over $1.25, billion. You're looking at expanding, not only the open pit, but aspects of the smelter. Let's begin to break down, first of all, what is the focus of the S3? What is it?
So the S3 project is a project that we started back in 2014, and it stalled for a few years. We'll get to that at some point. But really what we saw at Kansanshi was that the grades at Kansanshi were dropping. So when we started the mine, the average grade was about 1.6, 1.7% copper. And as you go deeper in the pit, the grade drops to around 0.58. That's almost a third of what it used to be. So S3 is about taking the throughput of Kansanshi from about 28, 29 million tons per year up to 54 million tons per year, so that as the grades are dropping, we can still maintain the production of Kansanshi at about 240,000 tons per year. And that's what we've essentially done. And this project on S3, the capital that we're spending is really on the mining side, is to get a new fleet of additional trucks. So it's 36 trucks and electric loading units and drill rigs. Those came in from the beginning of last year. They've all been assembled on site and commissioned, and those are operating. And then the bulk of the spend also goes into the process plant. So the process plant will get an upgrade of a new primary crusher and a new milling circuit and flotation plant.
Let's just get back to the aspect of the upside potential on the future of production. I didn't get you correctly there. You're currently ranging on an annual output of around 135,000 tons?
Yeah.
But you speak of over 50 million tons. Let's just get back there.
Yeah, so 54 million tons is the material that you have to process to produce your copper. So at the moment, we process 28 million tons of material. And as the grades have dropped, we've seen the production of Kansanshi drop down from about 270,000 tons per year to about 135,000. It will be about 140,000 tons. With the expansion, once we commission it mid-next year, that throughput doubles, goes to 54 million tons per year, and the copper output therefore goes up. So we see that Kansanshi in 2025, because the plant will start up about mid-year, we will get to about 170, 180,000 tons of copper next year. And in 2026, when we run the first full year, we'll be about 240,000 tons. So the essence of the project was really to take Kansanshi back to the 240,000 ton per year copper output.
So obviously this expansion of the pit, the smelter, is largely the throughput into those, output figures.
Yeah.
What about, the grade?
Now the grade of the copper, like I said, of the feed drops down to about 0.58% copper. Now the product that we get out of the process plant will still be about 25% copper. So we then feed that into the smelter, and the smelter produces 99.9% pure anodes. So that's what we sell into the market.
So as things stand, would you say that S3 project is on track to open production in Q2 of 2025?
Yeah. Now we've been working quite hard, monitoring every metrics of what we're doing on the project. And as of today, based on my report this morning with the project manager, we are on track. Like I said, the trucks, the mining side, the fleet is now working and mining the third pit, which will feed the new plant. And so that's on track. And in terms of construction on the process plant side, that's also going very well.
Now, one of the biggest arguments, and kudos on these investments in the billions of dollars, but I think the biggest argument also has been that for the longest, we've not been able to value add onto our mined copper. We are still basically working on copper, cathodes only for export, and even in terms of the smelters and the concentrators, sometimes big mining operations have to depend on neighboring Congo for some of these facilities. What are you doing in terms of the value addition within the whole value chain?
Thanks, Costa. So when we built the smelter back in 2015, that was really key for us. We needed to stop the export of concentrate and make sure that we can produce a product in Zambia that's ready for use here. So we built the smelter, and all our concentrate, none of them are going outside Zambia. All the concentrates are going into the Kansanshi smelter, and we produce an anode. Any oxide that we mine at Kansanshi goes through the leach plant and ends up as cathode. The next step, as you point out, is to really see how do we then turn that copper into valuables. So at the moment, now the copper that we make, about 10% of it goes into Zamefa for wire making in Zambia. And what we'd like to see as First Quantum is to really see Zamefa prosper and enlarge and expand and make sure that we can channel our copper into Zamefa much more than we are doing now. We've also been talking about getting into, say, battery manufacturing in Zambia. And so that's an avenue that we see that we can put our copper and also the nickel into that factory. And over time, we will start to see that we are not exporting raw materials out of Zambia to the rest of the world. And I look at copper cathode as raw material because at that point it still has to be formed into something that you and I use. So it's our intent really that that we see value addition right here in Zambia.
My worry, rather, or concern, Anthony, is the fact that for 60 years or for so many years as a country, we've understood this issue of, yes, we want to move away from copper dependency, so let's do diversification in mining. But this whole issue of value addition has been on the table for so long. You look at the 4th, 5th, we're now in the 8th National Development Plan. There's a mining in Saka coming not so far from now, this October. We're always talking. I've seen in papers the aspect of local content within the mining value chain, and why don't we actualize? Where are the bottlenecks towards this implementation? Is it a policy issue? Is it a capacity issue?
It's many things. It's a policy issue, and I'm glad to see that we're starting to see a lot more discussions around policies that are intentional about turning copper into something else, and about local content as well. So those things are coming through. But I think it's a much bigger matter, because when you look at anything that you do with the products that are coming out of mining, there has to be an ecosystem that supports whatever you want to get into. So, for example, if you want to get into value addition and to get into manufacturing, there's the financing aspect that you must make sure that it's there. And there's therefore a conversation that's much wider than just the mining companies. Mm-hmm. The discussions happening, and there are bodies in the government, like the PPDF and the PDU, that are talking to us and asking us what are those things, what are the ideas that would take us forth from just being a producer of copper and shipping it away, and becoming a country that can mine the copper, process it, make the cathode, pass it on to another company right here in Zambia and value add to it. And therefore, what comes out of Zambia might be a cell phone, or it might be, cables for electric cars. So the conversations are there. I think if you look back, and you might have been young, Costa, and I might have been a bit older, but in the 70s, every time we talked about we need to diversify, the conversation was more about, let's do agriculture as well. Mm. But we forget that we've been endowed with minerals in this country. So when we diversify, we shouldn't think that we are talking, agriculture must go ahead. But we must look at what we have in our hands, which is the minerals, and say diversification has to happen with these things. And if that's our starting point, and like I said, that's what we're hearing more and more these years, is that we can now start to look at, we've been endowed with this, this is what we have to work at.
Away from the issue of value addition, when you look at you've spoken about the gap in financing, very critical, and raising big amounts of money in the billions of dollars for mining exploration, for greenfield projects, and the cost of machinery is really not cheap. One of the biggest, complaints around mining investors such as FQM for Zambia was this issue of the shift in policy, especially around taxation and so on. The last report from the Chamber of Mines I saw, and in fact from even, it was PwC, was that I think from about 2009 to almost 2022, we had changed the policy over 13 times as a country, being surpassed even in terms of output by countries such as, the DRC, who were second to us on the continent. Have we finally gotten it right? Are mining houses now confident that we have stabilized on the policy front?
Now, look, we've been in Zambia since 1996, and we've seen policy changes up and down, laws that have been made. And in my view, there's no bad or good laws. It's just stability, right? And I think what we've heard out of this, we've heard them speak a lot more about stability. And we've had 2 or 3 bills that have come along in the last year, and we're discussing some of those now, and you referred to one of them just now. So I think what we're trying to do is that as the conversations happen for any policy changes, that we need to be comprehensive. So if we do make a change and the policy goes through Parliament and becomes law, that it's a law that we can actually live with for 10 years, for 20 years. So that's what we're looking for.
Why is that important for the mining sector, stability in terms of policy?
Because, Costa, you see, when you invest in mining, the return in mining is very long. So when you invest in mining, you're talking about, if you count from the time you start exploration, it probably takes you about 10 years before you finally build the mine. And it will probably take you from that point another 10 years or 15 years before you've got your money back. So you're talking about a period of 25 years. You're looking to invest and operate for 25 years for you to get your money
So
back.
stability is very important.
Stability
because you're
is key.
projecting on policy existing.
Yes. So we've seen in the world where a particular mining company gets a bilateral deal of, okay, we shall assure you stability over 20 years. But that doesn't work very well, because it's bilateral. You need policy, you need laws that are stable. So every mining company that enters the country knows this is the law and it's not changing for the next 15 or 20 years. And I think the key is making sure that there's consultation. So when a policy is being framed, that all the mining companies, experts from financing, from mining experts, metallurgy, all those according to the room, and lawyers, so that when the law is formulated, every base is being covered. That's the only way laws can stand for the long term. Like I said, we've been in Zambia since 1996, 28 years. And when we look back, our main complaint has not been about a bad law. It's been about laws changing the whole time. If there's a law that's in front of you, and you know this is how it's going to be for 20 years, you invest based on that law. And therefore, it doesn't bother you. So, yeah, I think the conversations are better now, and we really are hopeful that we can see stability now in the next 10 to 20 years. The government is intent on getting to 3 million tons per year of copper, and you can only do that with stability. And that stability is what will bring in investment.
Away from the excitement of the expansions around the S3, FQM also has invested heavily. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're talking not less than $500 million into your new enterprise, nickel mine, project. Let's break down also the expected benefits from this, because this is the diversification we're talking about away from copper. Let's talk the enterprise nickel mine.
The enterprise mine is right in the same area as Sentinel. The two mines are basically about 12 kilometers apart. They share most of the infrastructure there. As a business, I think for us, getting into nickel in Zambia has been very critical, is really key. Like I was saying earlier, when you talk about battery manufacturing, you really are talking about copper, are you talking about cobalt? And these two metals, we know we've had them in Zambia all along. We're talking about manganese. There's a lot of manganese coming out of Luapula and Northern right now as we speak. So bringing nickel into the picture really completes the picture. We will find lithium here for sure. So you've now got all the components that goes into making batteries. So for us, we are excited that as First Quantum, we've got a nickel mine that's definitely one of the biggest nickel mines in the world. It's got the potential to produce 40,000 tons of nickel. And if you look at the operations around the world, it's right there on the top. And that's right. I think we've got opportunity to now, with our aspirations of getting into EVs and batteries for the EVs, we've got a real opportunity of all the ingredients that go into making these things are right there. So it's exciting. Now, we commissioned it early this year. It's been running very, very well. And it's on track this year to produce about 22,000 tons of nickel. And yeah, as Zambia, we should be proud that we've got another nickel mine in Zambia.
With your interaction, obviously, with government, the president has been quite instrumental on this. We've seen him and his DRC counterpart sign agreements, both home and abroad, on partnerships towards this issue of a green, future and an EV battery. Do you think we have done, or we are doing enough really to position ourselves for what, in my view, is sort of a fourth or fifth industrial revolution for the world?
I think we are positioned extremely well in the sense that we are endowed with the minerals that go into that green future. where we have to do work is really making sure that we've got infrastructure that supports that sort of industry. So number one, you need to have the roads, and you need to have the rail. You need to have the power as well. And the road and the rail, not a big issue. As you will know, there's a Lobito corridor coming up. There's investments that are going into Tazama, so we've got east and west outlets. As First Quantum, we've just got a PPP signed for a road that will run from Mutanda to Kaoma. That takes us into Ovis Bay. So road and rail, we are sorted. The big issue that we have to work on as a country is really around power. So, as we were saying earlier, when we built Sentinel, we spent about $2.6 billion. And Sentinel produces about 250,000 tons of copper. At the moment, Zambia produces 800,000 tons of copper. To get to 3 million tons, we are short of 2.2 million, potentially. To get 2.2 million, you need about 10 Sentinel mines. 2.6 billion times 10, 26 billion. The power that Sentinel mine uses is about 150 megawatts that it needs to run normally.
That's a power plant on its own.
Yes.
That's half of Mamba.
so we need, in your words, we need about 10 Mambas. And if we want to go green, we need about 10 a Kariba and a half. So for us, we need to do more to attract investments, local and from outside Zambia, into the power sector. So we've got the roads, we've got the rails. We just need to make sure that the power is available to run that sort of industry.
Before we discuss power from a future point of view, just like COVID in 2020, mining as an industry was not left out. The current energy crisis, obviously necessitated by the worst drought that we've seen in over 100 years, has adversely impacted mining operations. Run us through what this challenge has been like.
Yeah, thanks, Costa. So roundabout towards the end of last year, we started to see that 2024 would be a challenge when we all realized that we're having a drought. And the declaration of that drought as a crisis early on in February just meant that we all knew what was coming. We've all seen load shedding over the last few years, but what we've seen this year is a different level. So, starting January this year with ZESCO of how we could go through this challenge throughout the year and make sure that our mines would continue to operate uninterrupted. Working with ZESCO, we've been able to get traders involved and also get involved in making sure we make prepayments to import more power into the grid. And that's what we've seen. As of today, we are importing about 65% of the power that our mines need.
And you're paying for this?
And we're paying for that. And that's many magnitudes higher than what our peers are doing. And that's been helpful. And for us, it was important that we import power to that level. It's been gradual. I mean, we started about 30% on the 1st of May, and on the 1st of July, we're up to 65. It was important for us that we can get power to our mines, but also make sure that ZESCO is able to bring more power into the grid so that the grid is stable. Because it's no good getting 300 megawatts to our mines out in Solwezi, and yet the grid is low on power. What that causes is you then start to get trip outs. And to make sure that the grid was stable, we needed to support ZESCO. We needed to make sure that we've got traders that are listed. And I'd like to say a big thank you to ZESCO. I think ZESCO has been very cooperative. ZESCO has had a very woods yet, but I think we've all learned how to collaborate, and we've all seen how we can work together to make sure that our
So what you explain is basically contrary to assertions that we hear, in that from the domestic market, and largely when everybody is desperate with this crisis, that ZESCO is importing power and selling cheaply to you, the mines. I'm sure you've heard this notion. Why should these mining giants who take up more power, make more money, be paying lower tariffs than domestic and other sectors? So you say you're importing, you are into a power purchase agreement, utilizing ZESCO's arrangement, but paying for that power to stabilize the grid and feed the mines to stability.
That is correct. So normally we would 0.6 cents a kilowatt hour for the power. The power that we're getting in is about 14.5 cents, and we do pay the full price for that. And what we're starting to see more is that we need to make sure that that message goes out, that people know that, number one, the mining companies are being load-shedded. So at 65%, what that means is that we are getting essentially power from ZESCO for 8 hours per day. And the rest of the 16 hours, we are using power that we bring in ourselves. That's the ratio. And the message also needs to, so I know that is so much better than what you and I are getting at our house, which is like 3 or 4 hours of power per day. But mining drives our economy, and so that extra 4 hours that the companies get is fair game. The key is the mining companies need to pay for the power at fair value. ZESCO should not subsidize a mining company. That's a business on its own. And that's what we've seen. ZESCO has been very clear about that for the imported power.
What would the situation been like, Anthony? Paint a picture if you had not gone into power importation.
We would have seen a lot more. We would have seen a lot of the mining companies cutting back production, and we ourselves would have been looking at Kansanshi. We're planning to do about 140, and on the other mine about 230,000 tons of copper. And that would not only have been an impact on the mining business, but that would impact the treasury as well.
Jobs.
And jobs as well, and so on and so forth. In Costa, we've seen that happen on what would look like a small scale. We know a lot of like barbershops and saloons and butcheries that are not functioning, and therefore loss of jobs and loss of services and so on and so forth. That would exactly what we would have seen with the mining companies. And if you consider that Kansanshi has 10,000 employees and Sentinel a similar number, that's putting 20,000 jobs at risk, and that's in nobody's interest. So our focus was really to make sure that we can run steady. When Mamba was down, cut back a few megawatts here and there, and we then went into importing more power. So we were able to even go through that period. But the focus really for us has been, we need to run, and we need to run uninterrupted throughout 2024.
Let's go to futuristic planning, and you ably put it. Government is projecting 3 million tons output of copper in the next 10 years. Your projects that you talk about here, S3, the Enterprise Nickel, we'll be talking about FQM Trident and Kalumbila shortly. They're all progressing towards expansion of throughput and output. But to do this, obviously, the power has to be in constant and stable supply. Yep. Right now, Zambia's hydro capacity is sitting at almost 3,600 megawatts. Definitely, when we hear what you say about how much Kansanshi is looking at on your future plans, you're looking at almost 10 Kariba dams in terms of capacity.
Yep.
What have your engagements been with government and the energy sector? Is there a plan to match your expansion capacities?
Yeah, Costa, what we've seen this year is because of the crisis that we've been in, it's actually forced a lot of conversations between power generators and mining companies, and also business people. So in terms of power, what we're looking at, we are looking at projects in Zambia in the hydro space and also solar. And I'm sure you've also heard about conversations regarding interconnectors between Tanzania and Angola. And business people are coming across to us, and we're having roundtable meetings around these things. For example, on the Tanzanian interconnector, we've had conversations with a company that's looking to do that project. And we are working on putting a structure that would be a PPP. So we can be connector. It's important to get the interconnection going, because that's what gives you the flexibility that you need. And our other avenue is really looking at supporting investments in Zambia in generation, solar and hydro, by being an off-taker to the project, to the projects. And I think we will see a solar project, a solar wind project going on at Kansanshi for 430 megawatts, and that should be operational in about 2028. It's a collaboration with Total Energies and FQM. So that will be going ahead. There's the interconnector one I spoke about earlier, and there's a few hydro project plants that we are looking. There's been a crisis, but in there we've had the opportunity to really engage with people that we would normally.
So you are confident that you, as a mining company yourselves, are investing into initiatives while government and ZESCO also rolls out in this. So these projects will take shape with power projects coming in to support the operations. Yes.
Now the power side is being addressed. I think what we need to be very clear about is to make sure that as the policies have been stable the last 3 years, is that we just give that assurance that that stability is here to stay. It's not a 5-year span thing, that it's here to stay, so that people can look ahead 10 years, 20 years, and come in, start doing exploration. Are we starting exploration? Are we starting to see that exploration is building up in Zambia? We need to make sure that that continues, because exploration is the basis, is really the starting point for any mining business.
Let's now turn to Kalumbila. I mean, we've touched on the S3, the Enterprise, and so on. The FQM Trident. You're talking about a $2.6 billion investment, obviously, there in FQM Trident. What has been the major impact of this operation, and what's happening down there?
So the Trident project is the home for the Sentinel mine and the Enterprise mine. And there's a third mine, that's why it's Trident. There's a third mine there called Intrepid, which we haven't got into yet, but we will get into. We did exploration on it many years ago. It's a combination of copper and nickel, so there's opportunity there. So when we built the mine back in 2011, 2012, it's probably a model of our thinking of what mining investment must look like. So we got into Kalumbila. It was a forest, most of it. There were settlements there at the time, but we got into there and said, we're going to build a mine here, and it's going to be a large mine. So with it, we then planned a food town around it. So Costa, you should visit that town if you haven't been to there yet. But we planned the town. It's a well-planned town with homes, recreation facilities there, hospitals, places of airport as well, with a runway which is well over. So the investment that we did there is really a model of what it means to build a mine. Building a mine is not about digging a hole in the ground, which is the pit, and then building a process plant and then shipping the materials out. But it's really building a community. That's called responsible mining. And that's what we look forward to do, that as we continue to do exploration in Zambia, the next mine that we build looks at developing a whole ecosystem, the mine, the community, everything that a community needs, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So that's really Kalumbila for you. We did an article in one of the papers about maybe 4 weeks, and we just the genesis. What was the thinking at the time, and what does Kalumbila look like now? And I'm very pleased that we've set the standard that other mining companies can look at. This is what it means to build a mine. So they just don't think about building a mine, just a mine, and nothing else around it.
Let me touch one other important aspect. Yes, exploration and then beginning to mine is one thing, but there have also been concerns around mining operations and their impact onto the environment vis-a-vis issues of climate change. And one thing that is also important that other mining operations forget is the after mining activities, people just leaving open craters, and this is exactly what you said, that investors are looked at, they just get the mineral out and they don't care what happens after. Sure. What is your environmental sustainability plan as FQM? So
if you look at Kansanshi or you look at Kalumbila, what you see there is that our approach to mining is to make sure that any disturbances that we do, that there's rehabilitation of those areas, to make sure that if it was a forest, it needs to stay as a forest. If it's areas that would have had wildlife, that they are maintained as such. So if you go to any one of our sites in Zambia, you will notice that when you drive through the gate, as you drive to the plant, you will go past impalas and giraffes and whatnot. Because what we do is we make sure that we start a game park on the mine site, so those animals grow, and we can translocate them into the wildlife, into game parks. So the province, that's sustainable mining. Also, there's a very high standard that we bring to make sure that whether it's water or any type of waste is managed in a way that's responsible. So there's a lot of aspects that get into that, and it's easy to explain it like here, but I think the real test is in going to our sites and having a look at how we manage that aspect. In the last 7 years, each year we've been progressively planting trees on our sites, large numbers. So last year in Kansanshi, we were able to plant about 38,000 trees. The previous year we did about 22. And the same on our other sites. So we are constantly revegetating our own mine sites and the areas around it. So that even the charcoal burning that you see outside the perimeter of our fence, that we are rehabilitating those areas as well.
Apart from revegetating and the wildlife that you talk about, complaints, especially with mining operations, whether it's the copper belt and so on, is how clean are your mining operations? I mean, release of effluent, for example, that you talk about, but also in the smelting aspect, the sulfur release and so on. Are you practicing clean and safe mining?
Clean and safe mining, Costa, is the standard at which mines are held to now, and Zambia's regulatory body, ZIMA, is very strict on that. So we are compliant on all aspects of our license in that regard, and even go beyond. So, now, for example, if you look at the smelter that we run in, smelters that you and I would have gone to a few years ago, many years ago, it's chalk and cheese. Now we've literally got a smelter that's running, and when you walk next to the casting wheel, that's where you see the hot metal. 50 meters away is good lawns and good grass, and the air quality is really good. So now we've put in technology in our smelter to make sure that all the gases, the SO2 and all that, is actually captured and converted into acid. So what you see coming out of the smelter is clean gases. So the effort is there, and the legislation makes sure that we are held to a standard, and if you're not compliant, there are penalties there. And if you look at our records in Zambia, you find that we are compliant on every front.
Coupled with clean mining is the aspect of safety within mining operations. Sadly, we have experienced in the last 2 years a number of mining accidents and loss of life. Obviously, some not out of established mining companies, but due to illegal mining. So sad. What is it that you can talk about as regards mining safety within your operations, and this being a huge concern?
Safety is important for a mining company, because a mining company depends on a large number of people working safely. There are people that you train. It's a big loss. So we've created a standard that we work to, and a methodology that we work to, which is called Think Safety, and empower our people to make sure that when they are working in any space, that they've got the power, if they see something that's unsafe, to stop the work and make sure that nobody does that work until it's made safe. And we've been running that campaign since about 2013, and it's run very well. Now we do see that there are accidents we see on other mine sites, even our own, but those are things that we then take each of those and study what went wrong, what could we have done differently. And therefore, we create this continuous learning cycle of we learning from every incident that happens. It's a journey that we see, Costa. But if we look at our statistics from 28 years ago when we started, or 10 years ago, you can see that there's been an improvement in our safety statistics.
Earlier on, when we spoke about clean mining, you spoke about the type of technology you're using in smelting. I want to touch on the aspect of the use of technology and now areas around artificial intelligence within mining exploration and just the operations. So is FQM investing in operations more cost effective, but more importantly a bit advanced?
Yeah, Costa, our whole business is really built on efficient and making sure that we are on the leading edge of making sure that the tools that we are using are the best in class. So let me just step back quickly. Let's just talk for a short time on safety. So on the safety side, what we saw earlier on was that the biggest source of an accident for us was really on our operators for the trucks. And so what we did over 10 years ago was we installed technology in our trucks. So the operator, when he's driving his truck, there's a camera that's looking at his face, and it's AI. It's studying what's happening to his eyes. And his eyes, if they're just moving in a particular way, it knows there's fatigue there. So it will shake his seat, it will send a signal to his supervisor. And with that technology, we saw that from having incidences, say about 300 to 400 incidences of micro sleep, which is somebody's on the truck and his eyes are just shutting and then he's up again. Those dropped from over 300 to almost zero nowadays. We see almost zero on a shift. That's technology at work for you, keeping our people safer. On the process plant and in mining as well, we actually have, we're using different aspects as well. I would go through a whole list of them, but if you look on the mining side, the way we now drill and blast. So before you would have a surveyor would have to walk on the ground and mark every place where you're supposed to drill and put explosives. Now, we've got a technology now that each of our drill rigs is got GPS installed on it. So it's moving on its own. It knows where it must drill to create a pattern. That's been running now for the last 2 years, and we are improving on it continuously. Once you get into the process plant, the technology that we use there is almost limited. There's lots that we're doing in that space. We have belts that will see what color material is coming to the mill. So that color of material, it needed these chemicals to extract the copper. So those decisions are being made by automation, and that's being fed into our process plant, and therefore all the reagents and everything else is being added automatically. So we are big on that. We are big on that, Costa.
The positives, obviously, of that for you as an operation is the efficiency and all that. The downside, others will argue that then human jobs are being lost out of the implementation of this technology.
Yeah. I'll take you back to before you and I were born. So I've heard the story about when Ford first started making cars. Everybody was very worried about what are those people, the people that used to sweep the streets of the dung from the horses, what are those people going to do? All those people will lose jobs, and they were worried. But when you get a shift like we are seeing now, just like with the motor car, when the motor car came, other jobs came online. Suddenly you had to have mechanics that you didn't have with horses. Suddenly you had to have all these things, car washes, panel beaters, insurance, which probably for the horse was not an issue. So my belief is that even as we see the technology come in, like on our site, with the technology that has teams in the back room now that have to monitor the integrity of the data, that have to look after the governance of the data that's being fed into this machine. Suddenly, where you had people out in the field, you are now getting much smarter people in the back room. So net-wise, there's probably going to be more jobs, but they just happen to be different jobs. So the challenge for me, Costa, is really not the loss of jobs, is how do we get our people ready, like future ready for those future jobs, not training people for the jobs that we know now. So the challenge really is how can we turn our universities and colleges to start to produce those people that are needed for that type of jobs, not...
Interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Now, earlier on, you spoke about diversification in that, yes, we've been doing copper, there's manganese required for the batteries, there's cobalt, and there's nickel, and these are the areas. Others would argue that within the alloy of the ore where you find copper and cobalt, it's impossible not to find, gold. How is it that you as FQM don't talk so much about the aspects of gold deposits? Are you not mining any gold in your operations?
So we get... So let me just talk generally about the Zambian copper belt. So the Zambian copper belt, the way it's been, and I started my work out in Konkola. In Konkola, when we mined copper, it had no gold in it. It was just copper. What we've seen is, as you go towards Kansanshi, you start to see a lot more gold. So in Kansanshi, we do produce gold. And that's something that we're proud of, because the gold that we produce the final bullion, and that's sold to the Bank of Zambia. And the Bank of Zambia has been able to start creating reserves. Since we signed that contract 3 years ago, they are creating reserves in gold, which is good. But anyway, so as you get into Kansanshi, you start to see more gold. And as you go towards Kalumbila, the gold drops off quite a bit. You start to see a bit more nickel. So if we find copper with gold, we put the effort in, we put the technology in to make sure that we recover it. If we find nickel with our copper, like we did at Enterprise, we put the technology in and recover the nickel. So we do talk about gold a lot as FKM, because when we put out our results for Kansanshi, we have to report gold as well. And I think that and I think the Bank of Zambia has also been quite appreciative, and they talk about it a lot, about the gold that they get out of Kansanshi and turn into reserves.
So you can confidently say that there's no under-declaration on the gold side, because again, these are the assertions we get, that there's prominence on copper. Basically, for lack of a better term, being smuggled out and not being declared.
I'm very, very confident that the gold that we produce is declared. You have to look at it, Costa, in the sense that the copper that we sell and the gold that we sell, we sell to a third party. And therefore, you have to have an auditor that audits all that. And the Mines Ministry also audits, and so on and so forth. So the processes are there to make sure that the declaration of copper or gold or any metals contained. Now, for example, in Kansanshi, there's a small amount of silver, which is the equivalent silver per year, is roughly about maybe $45,000 worth of silver, which is insignificant, right, for a mining company. But that's reported in our results, and also to the Ministry of Mines. So for me, in this day and age, it's hard to see that you could have under declaration for a major mining company like ourselves, or Barrick, or Mopani, big mining companies that are audited quite extensively.
Two final things is this issue of the trust component and the benefit. We really, as a country, benefiting from our mines. I've looked at reports from the committee in Parliament on parastatals, and quite sad in the aspect of declaration of dividends, especially by mining companies operating in Zambia. Like profits, most of them, again, the argument on the national platform is that mining companies are being given tax incentives, tax waivers. They're claiming VAT refunds. Declare no dividends or profits. How has FQM managed to successfully do this? I mean, when I look at these reports, it's you are singled out as one of those mining companies that are declaring dividends back to ZCC, MIH, and government year in, year out.
Yeah. Like I said, we've been in Zambia since 28 years now, and what we've learned is, if you operate in any country, and I spent 4 years in Finland, 4 years in Mauritania, it's about really a partnership with the government. And for us, that's what it's been. We do get audits done, our profits, and therefore, based on that, corporation tax has to be paid, and it's paid, and royalties are paid, and they're paid. So, Costa, in a sense, it's hard for me to understand your question because needs to make sure that it's being audited by a reputable audit firm, so that there's nothing of this financial engineering that we hear of, where a mining company is operating for years and years in a country and it's been declaring losses. If First Quantum was declaring losses, if it was a loss-making business from 1996, would have been left the business and gone into agriculture or something else. So for me, the real litmus test is, if a mining company declares that it's making a loss 1 year, and the next year, I think it's about time to have a chat about maybe you need to get out of the business and let somebody else who knows about mining run this mine.
Finally, I want us to tackle issues of local participation and community development, or issues of your... You've done well. You're talking investments in billions of dollars and your expansion projects. Beyond just creating jobs for locals, what other benefits are there from these mining operations of yours in terms of value chain and local participation from suppliers of goods and services?
Yep.
I've heard complaints, for example, from the local cleaners association are not giving locals opportunities. Cleaning is being given to foreign companies. How true is this? How are locals participating to benefit from the mines?
Yeah, Costa, that subject is also one of those ones which is very current at the moment. And from where we stand, the statistics are that at the moment, our business has got on our books people that are working with us. Of our total spend last year, about 30% is going to Zambian local, which is Zambian companies that are owned by Zambians. 80% of our spend is to Zambian domiciled ones like the Hitachi you see down the road here and so on and so forth. Our intent is to really grow that 30% of Zambian-owned companies coming into the mining value chain in our business. And we started a work stream around that of how we push that up. In terms of the complaints that you hear, there's a lot more we should be doing in this space. You can never be in a place where there's no complaint about something. There has to be. And in this particular case, we see where the gaps are. It's really trying to get more and more Zambian-owned companies, local companies owned by Zambians. Just to be clear, I defined that twice. To make sure that those are being empowered and they've got access to finance to make sure that they can participate. What are we doing as a business? What we're doing is we are looking this year into next year, we are going to look at how can we finance either by making sure that they get prepayments or that they get opportunity for us with the banks or with ourselves, because that's where I see the gaps. You've got a trading company that's listed in South Africa. They can borrow money out of a bank at 5%. Another trading company that is 26%. So they can't compete. And as a mining company, I'm trying to buy the cheapest goods that I can find. Same quality, but cheapest. I'll go this way all the time. Hand and saying, let's just make it happen. Look away, don't worry about the price. That makes the mining company lose value. And if the mining company is losing value, the mining company won't run for the whole mine life. We don't want that. So I think we've said, let's all just step back. If the issue is finance, what are the options of how we can finance the local companies? We've run a few trials on the copper belt with some of the suppliers of the chemicals to the mining, to the mines, and with some companies that are supplying fuel as well, similar. Provide finance as a test case and see how they go. And they performed well. So it's how do we roll that out and just make it bigger? Until we address that aspect of locals or local companies participating in the mining value chain, I'm telling you, Costa, mining will continue to be seen as these big conglomerates that run in a country, make lots of money, especially if we don't do any value add here, and the minerals go away and there's very little value left, wrongly or rightly. But that perception will continue. So we are aware of that, and we're putting in a lot of work to make sure that we can change that in reality.
The narrative needs to change. Let's conclude on an issue of what I would say CSR, or community development at national level. We've been hit by this drought. Apart from energy, the disaster was also in food insecurity. This issue of you providing transportation support from Tanzania into Zambia for the maize, that fingers pointing at you, from mining you're now into transportation of maize and charging the government. Let's clarify this issue.
Yeah, Costa. At times you sign off on something to be done, and then you're sitting at yours thinking, why did I do it? And then the only consolation I feel about the action that we took as a business, which I signed off on, is that we did the right thing. So what we did was, we had a meeting with the DMMU early in the year, and they said they were going to procure maize in Tanzania. And the cost of maize is $250 a ton. the transport of that maize is about $120 a ton. So we offered that we would put $500,000 to transport the maize so that the government doesn't have to pay for it. And that was what the deal was. So what we did was, instead of giving the cash direct to the DMMU so they pay it, we said the transporters that are carrying copper can, on their way back, come with the maize at the cost of 120. So we've physically moved 4,000 tons of maize, which is what $500,000 can pay for. And all the transporters that were involved in the project have all been paid by ourselves. And the DMMU is going to then continue to move the rest of, they've got 650,000 tons of maize they've bought.
So no money was being paid to FQM to transport maize on behalf of government?
No. FQM paid money for transporters to move the maize out of Tanzania into Zambia. So I hope that clarifies the subject. The amount of noise that created and the amount of headache and people coming this and that. The consolation for me that I'm convinced today, and as I was then, that it was the right thing to do.
Anthony Mukutuma, thank you so much for talking to us on Cost this evening.
Okay, thank you very much, Costa, and thank you very much, viewers.
My guest has been the country director for First Quantum Minerals in Zambia, Anthony Mukutuma. We've been discussing, obviously, mining operations at one of Zambia's mining giants, their S3 smelter and pit expansion projects, and obviously dropping down to what is happening at the Enterprise Nickel Mine and the Kalumbila Trident project as Zambia turns 60 this month and this year. What do we reflect on in terms of the contribution within the mining sector? Thank you so much for watching. Remember that you can catch us on our live stream on Facebook. It's Diamond TV Online, on YouTube, Diamond TV Zambia. Good night and God bless.